The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in February, and I knew before opening it that Patricia Hutchins had found something new to complain about. I was right. According to the 3-page document typed in aggressive 12-point font, I was in violation of Section 4.7 of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA covenant for unsightly accumulation of snow and ice in an unapproved area of the property. I stood in my driveway in Boulder, Colorado, holding that letter while snowflakes landed on the paper, and I actually laughed out loud. This was going to be a battle. My name is Kevin Anderson, and I have lived at 847 Cascade Drive for 7 years. When I bought this house, I did my homework. As a structural engineer working for one of Denver's largest firms, I understood property documentation better than most people. I reviewed every single page of the HOA covenants, the original drainage plans filed with the county, and even the geological survey. That corner of my lot where I piled snow after clearing my driveway was not just convenient. It was essential to the property's drainage system. The pile in question sat in the far northwest corner of my lot, about 15 feet from both property lines. After every snowfall, I would clear my driveway and walkways, then use my small tractor to push the snow into that designated area. By mid-February, the pile had grown to about 8 feet high and 20 feet across. It was not blocking anyone's view. It was not on anyone else's property. It was simply sitting there, doing exactly what the original civil engineer who designed this neighborhood intended it to do back in 2003. I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 2 doors down and served on the HOA board. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Let me guess," Marcus said before I could speak. "Patricia sent you a letter about your snow pile. How did you know?" "Because she brought it up at the last board meeting. Kevin, I tried to shut it down, but she would not let it go. She has been driving past your house every day taking pictures." I felt my jaw tighten. "The snow has to go somewhere, Marcus. I cannot just make it disappear. I know that. You know that. Patricia thinks it is an eyesore that is bringing down property values." He sighed heavily. "Look, you need to come to the next board meeting. It is Thursday night at 7. Bring whatever documentation you have, because she is pushing for daily fines." After hanging up, I walked around my property in the falling snow, examining the drainage system with fresh eyes. The neighborhood sat on a gentle slope, with my house positioned near the middle of the development. During the original construction, the civil engineering firm had designed a sophisticated drainage network to handle snowmelt and heavy rain. That northwest corner of my lot was not random. It was the collection point for surface drainage from 3 different properties. The ground sloped naturally toward that spot, where a series of underground drains carried the water to the detention pond at the edge of the development. If I stopped piling snow there, the spring melt would create serious problems. The water would flow directly toward my foundation instead of into the drainage system. Worse, it might redirect toward my neighbor's property, creating a whole new set of issues. This was not about aesthetics. This was about basic civil engineering. I spent the next 2 days gathering documentation. I started with the county records office, where I pulled the original site plans from 2003. The civil engineer who designed Meadowbrook Heights was a firm called Western Slope Engineering, and their plans clearly showed the drainage patterns for each lot. The documents even included notes about snow storage areas, though the terminology used was surface water collection zones. My corner was marked with specific annotations about seasonal water management. Next, I contacted Western Slope Engineering directly. The firm was still in business, now run by the son of the original founder. I explained my situation to their receptionist, and she transferred me to a senior engineer named Robert Mills. Meadowbrook Heights, Robert said thoughtfully. My father worked on that project. I remember because he was particularly proud of the drainage design. The developer wanted to cut corners, but Dad insisted on doing it right. I need someone to confirm that my snow storage area is part of the original drainage plan, I said. The HOA is trying to fine me for using it. Robert was quiet for a moment. Send me your address and the relevant documents. I will review our files and get back to you. By Wednesday afternoon, I had responses from both the county and Western Slope Engineering. The county records specialist sent me digital copies of the original plans, along with a letter confirming that the drainage system was designed with specific collection points on each property. Robert Mills went a step further. He sent me a detailed technical memo explaining why that corner of my lot was critical to the drainage design, complete with slope calculations and water flow projections. He even offered to attend the HOA meeting as an expert witness. Thursday evening arrived with another light snowfall. I drove to the Meadowbrook Heights Community Center with a briefcase full of documents and a growing sense of frustration. The meeting room was in a bland building near the neighborhood entrance, with fluorescent lights and folding chairs arranged in neat rows. About 20 residents had shown up, which was a large crowd for an HOA meeting. Apparently, word had spread about the great snow pile controversy. Patricia Hutchins sat at the front table with 4 other board members. She was exactly what you would expect. Late 40s, highlighted blonde hair styled in that aggressive suburban cut, and the kind of tight smile that never reached her eyes. She wore a burgundy blazer over a white blouse and had a stack of printed photos in front of her. Marcus gave me an apologetic look from his seat at the end of the table. The other board members were Janet Kowalski, who always seemed half asleep at these meetings, Tom Bradford, a retired accountant who took everything too seriously, and Denise Murphy, who mostly just agreed with whatever Patricia said. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. We trudged through the usual business, landscaping updates, pool maintenance schedules, and a debate about whether the entrance sign needed repainting. Then, Patricia cleared her throat and pulled out her photos. Item 7 on the agenda: property maintenance violation at 847 Cascade Drive, she announced. Mr. Anderson has created a massive and unsightly snow pile that is visible from the street and is lowering the aesthetic value of our community. She held up a photo of my snow pile, which looked perfectly normal to me. Just snow, sitting in a corner, minding its own business. I have documented this violation over the past 3 weeks, Patricia continued. The pile has grown progressively larger and shows no signs of being removed. This is clearly against our covenants regarding property maintenance and aesthetic standards. I raised my hand. May I respond? Patricia looked annoyed but nodded. You will have your turn to speak, Mr. Anderson. I would prefer to respond now since you are making accusations about my property. Several residents murmured in agreement. Patricia's smile grew tighter, but she gestured for me to approach the front. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the documentation. I have here the original site plans for Meadowbrook Heights, filed with Boulder County in 2003. I handed copies to each board member. If you look at page 14, you will see the drainage design for my lot. That corner where I pile snow is marked as a surface water collection zone. Tom Bradford adjusted his reading glasses and studied the document. What exactly does that mean? It means the civil engineer who designed this neighborhood intended for water to collect in that specific location, I explained. During spring snowmelt and heavy rain, Water from my property and the two adjacent properties naturally flows to that point, where it enters the underground drainage system. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. That is for rain, not for you to create a snow mountain in your yard. Snow becomes water, I said flatly. Where do you think snowmelt goes? A few residents chuckled. Patricia's face reddened. I also have a technical memo from Western Slope Engineering, the firm that designed our drainage system. I distributed more copies. Their senior engineer confirms that my snow storage location is not only appropriate but necessary for proper drainage function. If I stop piling snow there, the spring melt could cause foundation damage or flooding. Marcus read through the memo carefully. This is pretty definitive, Patricia. The engineer says specifically that interfering with this drainage pattern could cause problems. I do not care what some engineer says, Patricia snapped. It looks terrible and several residents have complained. Which residents? I asked. I would like to hear from them directly. Patricia shuffled her papers. They expressed their concerns to me privately. So, there are no actual complaints, just your personal opinion, I said. The room fell silent. Janet Kowalski, who had been studying the drainage plans, looked up. Patricia, if the original plans show this is a drainage area, we cannot just override that. We could be liable if there is water damage. The covenants give us the authority to maintain aesthetic standards, Patricia insisted. The covenants also require us to follow applicable laws and regulations, Marcus added. The county approved these drainage plans. We cannot just ignore them because we do not like how they look. I pulled out one more document. I also have the county's letter confirming that the drainage system must be maintained as originally designed. Altering it would require a new engineering study and county approval. Tom Bradford leaned back in his chair. How much would that cost? Tens of thousands of dollars, I said. Maybe more. And there is no guarantee the county would approve changes. Patricia stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We cannot just let people pile garbage and snow wherever they want because of some old plan from 20 years ago. It is not garbage, it is snow, I said, keeping my voice level. And those old plans are still the legal framework for how this property functions. Unless you want to pay to redesign the entire drainage system, I am going to keep piling snow exactly where the engineers intended. The vote was 3-2 in my favor. Marcus, Janet, and Tom all voted to dismiss the violation. Patricia and Denise voted against me, but they were outnumbered. Patricia gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements and adjourned the meeting without another word. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to find an orange construction fence surrounding my snow pile. Not near my property line, but right around the pile itself, including stakes driven into my lawn. A printed sign hung on the fence. HOA violation, area no access by order of HOA board. I stood there in my bathrobe and boots, coffee mug in hand, staring at this fence on my property. Patricia had apparently decided that if she could not find me, she would just take matters into her own hands. I called Marcus immediately. Did you know Patricia was going to put a fence around my snow pile? What? No. He sounded genuinely shocked. Kevin, the board did not approve that. She is acting on her own. She put it on my property without permission. That is trespassing at minimum. Let me call an emergency board meeting. Do not do anything until we sort this out. But I was done waiting for the board to control Patricia. I called the Boulder County Sheriff's non-emergency line and explained the situation. The dispatcher was clearly trying not to laugh, but she sent a deputy out anyway. Deputy Martinez arrived about an hour later. He was a young guy with a professional demeanor who took notes while I explained the situation. I showed him the photos I had taken that morning and the property survey showing where my lot lines were. "So this fence is entirely on your property?" he asked. "Completely. She did not even have the courtesy to put it on the property line. And the HOA board did not authorize this action." 3 members voted against the violation yesterday. The HOA president apparently decided to ignore that vote. Deputy Martinez walked around the fence, examining it carefully. "Technically, she has trespassed and possibly committed criminal mischief by installing this without your permission." "Do you want to press charges?" I thought about it. "Not yet, but I want it documented." He nodded and wrote up a report. "Keep this case number. If she tries anything else, call us immediately. And you are within your rights to remove this fence since it is on your property." After Deputy Martinez left, I went to my garage and got my bolt cutters. The fence was the cheap temporary kind used at construction sites, held together with plastic zip ties. I cut every single zip tie, folded up the fence panels, and stacked them neatly at the end of my driveway with a note: "HOA property, please retrieve." 20 minutes later, Patricia's silver Lexus SUV screeched to a stop in front of my house. She jumped out, leaving the driver's door open, and stormed up my driveway. She was wearing yoga pants and a North Face jacket, her face red with anger. "You destroyed HOA property," she shouted. "You installed a fence on my property without permission," I replied calmly. "That is called trespassing. I have a sheriff's report if you would like to see it. You cannot just do whatever you want. There are rules in this community." "You are right. There are rules, including the rule that says you need my permission to put anything on my property. Also, the rule that says you cannot ignore board votes just because you lost." Patricia's hands clenched into fists. "You think you are so smart with your engineer friends and your documents. This community was peaceful before people like you started causing problems." "People like me?" I kept my voice level. "You mean people who follow the actual rules instead of your personal preferences." She jabbed a finger toward the snow pile. "That pile is staying in the middle of spring. It will flood your foundation and you will be crying to the HOA for help. Then I will deal with that. On my property, with my money." Patricia leaned closer, her voice dropping to something almost threatening. "You have made an enemy today, Mr. Anderson. I have been running this HOA for 8 years and I always get what I want." "Not this time," I said. She grabbed the fence panels, threw them in the back of her Lexus with impressive rage strength, and peeled out down the street. I went back inside and poured another cup of coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I had dealt with difficult people in my professional life, but Patricia was something else entirely. Marcus called an hour later. "Emergency board meeting tonight at 6. Patricia is trying to call another vote on your snow pile." "She cannot do that. The board already voted." "I know, but she is claiming new information. Just be there, okay?" That evening's meeting was even more crowded than the previous one. Word had spread through the neighborhood about the fence incident, and apparently people wanted to see what would happen next. I arrived at 5:45 and found Robert Mills waiting in the parking lot. The civil engineer had driven up from Denver to provide expert testimony. "Thank you for coming," I said, shaking his hand. "Happy to help. Your HOA president sounds like a piece of work. You have no idea." Inside, Patricia had prepared for battle. She had blown up photos of my snow pile to poster size and mounted them on foam board. She had printed copies of property value analyses from nearby neighborhoods. She even had a stack of what appeared to be complaint letters, though I had my doubts about their authenticity. The meeting started with Patricia immediately moving to reopen discussion on my property. Marcus tried to object on procedural grounds, but Tom Bradford pointed out that board members could request reconsideration of recent votes if new information was available. "I have received numerous complaints from residents about the snow pile," Patricia announced, waving her stack of letters. "This is not just my personal opinion. This is a community concern." "May I see those letters?" I asked. Patricia clutched them protectively. "They are confidential." "That is convenient," I muttered. Marcus held up his hand. "Patricia, if you are using these letters as evidence, the board needs to review them. You cannot just say they exist." Reluctantly, Patricia passed the letters around. I watched as each board member read through them, their expressions growing increasingly skeptical. Janet Kowalski finally looked up. "Patricia, these letters are all printed in the same font, with the same margins, and most of them use identical phrasing. Different residents can have similar concerns," Patricia said defensively. "They are also unsigned," Tom Bradford added. "We have no way to verify who wrote these or if they are even real." Patricia's face flushed dark red. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I am saying this is not proper evidence," Tom replied. I stood up. "I have brought Robert Mills, a senior engineer from Western Slope Engineering, to explain the drainage design in detail. If we are reconsidering this issue, I think the board should hear from an actual expert." Robert approached the front table and introduced himself. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and the confident manner of someone who knew his field inside and out. He opened his laptop and pulled up a detailed presentation. "Meadowbrook Heights was designed with a comprehensive stormwater management system," Robert began. "Each lot has designated drainage patterns that direct water to specific collection points. These collection points feed into the underground infrastructure that prevents flooding and foundation damage." He pulled up a diagram showing my property and the surrounding area. "Mr. Anderson's northwest corner is one of these critical collection points. During the original design phase, my father calculated the water volume from spring snowmelt and heavy rain events. This location handles runoff from 3 properties totaling approximately 1.2 acres of impervious surface. But he is piling snow there artificially," Patricia interrupted. "That is not natural drainage." Robert looked at her with barely concealed patience. "Where do you think snow goes, madam?" "It melts. Mr. Anderson is actually doing exactly what the system was designed to handle. By piling snow in that location, he is ensuring the meltwater enters the drainage system efficiently rather than flowing randomly across his property." "But it looks terrible," Patricia insisted. "That is a subjective opinion, not an engineering concern. What is an engineering concern is what happens if you prevent him from using that location." Robert pulled up another slide showing water flow projections. "If snow is piled elsewhere on the property, the spring melt would flow toward the foundation. Based on typical Boulder County snowfall, we are talking about thousands of gallons of water over the course of several weeks." Tom Bradford leaned forward. "What kind of damage are we talking about?" "Foundation cracking, basement flooding, erosion of landscaping, and potential water intrusion into adjacent properties. Repair costs could easily reach $50,000 to $100,000, and if water damages neighboring properties, the HOA could face liability claims." The room fell silent. Patricia's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. Janet Kowalski spoke up. "It seems clear that Mr. Anderson is following the original engineering design. I move that we permanently close this issue and prohibit any further harassment about his snow storage area." "Second," Marcus said immediately. The vote was 4-1, with only Patricia voting against. She sat rigid in her chair, staring straight ahead while the rest of the meeting continued. When it finally adjourned, she left without speaking to anyone. I thanked Robert profusely and bought him dinner at a steakhouse in downtown Boulder. We talked about drainage design, HOA horror stories, and the general challenges of making people understand engineering principles. By the time I got home around 10, I felt confident that the snow pile battle was finally over. The next morning, I discovered that confidence was premature. My snow pile had been vandalized overnight. Someone had sprayed it with dozens of cans of bright pink and green spray paint, creating a garish mess visible from 3 blocks away. They had also scattered trash throughout the pile: plastic bags, empty bottles, food wrappers, all frozen into the snow. A large cardboard sign stuck out of the top reading, "Anderson's Trash Pile." I stood there looking at this mess, anger building in my chest. This was deliberate, targeted harassment, and I had a pretty good idea who was responsible. I documented everything with photos and videos before calling the sheriff's office again. This time, a different deputy arrived, Deputy Chen, an older woman with sharp eyes who immediately recognized this as more than a prank. "Someone is really mad at you," she observed. "The HOA president," I said, showing her the timeline of events. "She has been escalating ever since I won the board vote." "You have any proof she did this?" "Not direct proof, no." Deputy Chen walked around the vandalized pile, taking her own photos. "Here is the problem. Without witnesses or security footage, this is just criminal mischief with an unknown perpetrator. We can file a report, but unless we catch someone in the act or find evidence, there is not much we can do. So she can just keep harassing me. I am not saying that." Deputy Chen pulled out her card. "Get security cameras, good ones, covering your whole property. If this happens again, we will have evidence. And I am going to have a conversation with your HOA president about harassment and criminal mischief." After she left, I drove immediately to a home security store and spent $2,000 on a professional camera system. The technician came out that same afternoon and installed 6 cameras covering every angle of my property, all recording to a cloud storage system. I also got a prominent sign for my front yard: 24-hour video surveillance. Then I spent 3 hours cleaning spray paint off snow, which is just as miserable as it sounds. The paint had soaked into the top layer, so I basically had to shovel off and relocate several tons of contaminated snow. By the time I finished, my back ached and my mood was murderous. Marcus stopped by as I was finishing up. "Kevin, I am so sorry. This has gotten completely out of hand. You think Patricia did this?" "I do not have proof, but yes, I think so, or she got someone else to do it." He ran a hand through his hair. "The rest of the board is talking about removing her as president. This is beyond anything we have dealt with before." "How long would that take?" "At least a month. We have to follow proper procedures, give her a chance to defend herself, hold a vote. It is a whole process. A month is a long time for her to keep escalating. I know, just be careful, okay, and keep documenting everything." The weekend passed quietly. My new cameras recorded plenty of footage: neighbors walking dogs, kids playing, the occasional delivery truck. Nothing suspicious. I started to think maybe Patricia had gotten the message. Monday afternoon proved me wrong. I came home from work to find a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. According to the letter, I was being sued for willful violation of community covenants, destruction of HOA property, and creating a hostile environment for board members. They were seeking $20,000 in damages plus attorney fees. I read the letter 3 times, my disbelief growing with each pass. This was insane. The board had voted in my favor. I had documentation from engineers and the county, and Patricia was suing me anyway. I called my own attorney, Sarah Henderson, who specialized in HOA disputes. She listened to the whole story, occasionally making notes. "This is a slap suit," Sarah said when I finished. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is suing you to harass and intimidate you, not because she has an actual case." "Can she do that?" "Technically, anyone can file any lawsuit, but Colorado has strong anti-slap laws. We can file a motion to dismiss and potentially recover your attorney fees." She paused. "Kevin, how far do you want to take this?" "As far as necessary. I am not being bullied off my own property." "Good. Because I think we should not just defend against this suit. We should countersue for harassment, trespass, and abuse of authority. Make this expensive enough that she thinks twice about continuing." Over the next week, Sarah filed a comprehensive response to Patricia's lawsuit along with a countersuit. We included everything: the fence incident, the vandalism, the fake complaint letters, the repeated violations of board procedures. We also sent a letter to every member of the HOA board explaining that Patricia's lawsuit was unauthorized and that she could be personally liable for costs. That letter had an immediate effect. Marcus called me the next evening. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow night. We are voting on whether to remove Patricia as president and whether the HOA should withdraw the lawsuit. Will you have enough votes?" "I think so. Janet and Tom are furious about the lawsuit. They never authorized it, and Patricia used HOA funds to hire an attorney without board approval. That is a clear violation of our bylaws." The next night's board meeting was the most dramatic yet. The room was packed with residents who had heard about the lawsuit. Patricia sat at the front table looking defiant, her attorney beside her, a nervous-looking young man who kept checking his phone. Marcus opened the meeting by addressing the lawsuit directly. "The board has been made aware that Patricia Hutchins hired an attorney and filed suit against a community member without board authorization. This violates our bylaws and potentially exposes the HOA to liability." Patricia's attorney stood up. "My client acted within her authority as president to protect the community's interests. Your client acted unilaterally on a matter that requires board approval," Sarah Henderson said from the audience. She stood up, tall and imposing in her business suit. "I represent Mr. Anderson, and I have to say, this is one of the most egregious abuses of HOA authority I have seen in 15 years of practice." "Who are you?" Patricia demanded. "Sarah Henderson, attorney at law. And before this board votes on anything, they should know that continuing this meritless lawsuit will be very expensive. My client has documentation proving he is in the right. Your engineer confirmed it. The county confirmed it. You lost the board vote, yet you are still harassing him." "He is in violation of our covenants," Patricia shouted, standing up so fast her chair tipped over. "No, he is not," Sarah replied calmly. "And when we finish countersuing for harassment, abuse of authority, and malicious prosecution, you may want to reconsider your approach." Tom Bradford cleared his throat. "I move that we remove Patricia Hutchins as HOA president effective immediately for unauthorized use of HOA funds and violation of board procedures." "Second," Janet said. "You cannot do this." Patricia's voice had gone shrill. "I have built this community. I have kept property values up. I have maintained standards. You have harassed a resident who was following the rules," Marcus said quietly. "That is not leadership, Patricia. That is bullying." The vote was 4-1, with Patricia voting against her own removal. She stood there for a moment, her face going through several shades of red, before grabbing her purse and storming out. Her attorney followed, still looking at his phone. The board then voted unanimously to withdraw the lawsuit and issue a formal apology to me. Marcus was elected temporary president until proper elections could be held. As the meeting adjourned, Several neighbors came up to shake my hand and apologize for not speaking up sooner. I thought it was finally over. I really did. 2 days later, someone slashed all 4 tires on my truck. The security cameras caught a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask approaching around 3 in the morning. They knew where the cameras were and kept their face hidden, but their build and movements looked female. Deputy Chen came out again, this time with a detective named Rodriguez. They reviewed the footage carefully. "We cannot identify the perpetrator from this," Detective Rodriguez said, "but the pattern of harassment is clear. Has Patricia Hutchins made any direct threats? She said I had made an enemy and that she always gets what she wants." "That is not quite enough for a restraining order, but we are building a case. Keep documenting everything." The tire slashing cost me $800. I filed an insurance claim and added 2 more cameras covering the street. I also varied my schedule, coming home at different times and parking in different locations. For a week, nothing happened. Then my mailbox was smashed with a baseball bat. Then someone poured motor oil all over my driveway. Then my trash cans were tipped over and scattered across the lawn on pickup day. Each incident was captured on camera, but the perpetrator always wore concealing clothing and never looked directly at the cameras. Detective Rodriguez said they were clearly experienced or had researched how to avoid identification. "But we know who it is," I said in frustration. "Knowing and proving are different things," Rodriguez replied. "We need something that definitively identifies Patricia Hutchins. Until then, we can only file reports and hope she makes a mistake." Marcus and the other board members were horrified by the escalation. They sent Patricia a cease and desist letter, formally banning her from HOA activities. Sarah Henderson filed for a restraining order, though we knew proving the harassment would be difficult without direct identification. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I took the day off work and met Sarah at the Boulder County Courthouse. Patricia arrived with her attorney, looking perfectly composed in a navy suit. In the courtroom, she could have been anyone's pleasant suburban mom. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Martinez, reviewed our evidence. We had the timeline of harassment, the camera footage, Patricia's threats at my house, and statements from board members about her behavior. Patricia's attorney argued that we had no proof his client was responsible for any of the vandalism. The camera footage showed an unidentified person. Anyone could have done these things. His client was a respected community member being unfairly targeted. Judge Martinez listened to both sides, then looked directly at Patricia. "Mrs. Hutchins, did you install a fence on Mr. Anderson's property without authorization?" "I was acting as HOA president to enforce community standards," Patricia said. "That is not what I asked. Did you or did you not install a fence on his property without permission?" Patricia hesitated. "I directed the installation, yes. And you are aware that constituted trespassing." "I was acting within my authority." "An authority you no longer have," the judge noted. "Mr. Anderson, I am granting a temporary restraining order. Mrs. Hutchins, you are to stay at least 100 yards away from Mr. Anderson's property and person. You are not to contact him directly or indirectly. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" "This is ridiculous," Patricia said. "He is the one who, do you understand?" Judge Martinez repeated, her voice sharp. "Yes," Patricia said through gritted teeth. As we left the courthouse, Sarah put a hand on my arm. "This is not over. She is escalating, and restraining orders do not always stop people like her. Be careful." I went home and checked all my cameras. Everything was working properly. I made sure my doors were locked and my security system was armed. Then I sat in my living room, looking out at my snow pile through the window, and wondered how a simple dispute about drainage had spiraled into something this dark. That night, around 2 in the morning, my security system alarm went off. I jolted awake, heart pounding, and grabbed my phone to check the cameras. Someone was in my backyard, moving toward my house. I called 911 while pulling up the camera feed on my tablet. The figure was definitely female, average height, wearing dark clothing. She was carrying something, some kind of container. As I watched, she started pouring liquid around the foundation of my house. "There is someone in my backyard," I told the 911 dispatcher. "I think she is pouring gasoline around my house." "Are you inside the house?" "Yes." "Get out now, leave immediately." I grabbed my keys and ran for the front door. As I burst outside, I could smell it, gasoline, strong and acrid. I ran to my truck and peeled out of the driveway just as the first sheriff's car came screaming down the street. The next few minutes were chaos. More deputies arrived. Fire trucks came as a precaution. And then I watched from behind a police car as they found Patricia Hutchins hiding in my backyard, a gas can and matches in her possession. She did not go quietly. She screamed about how I had ruined the neighborhood, how I had destroyed everything she had built, how I deserved what was coming to me. It took 3 deputies to get her into handcuffs and into the back of a cruiser. Detective Rodriguez came over to where I was standing. "You okay?" "She was going to burn down my house," I said, my voice shaking, "over a snow pile." "Not over a snow pile, over losing control." He shook his head. "Some people cannot handle not getting their way. When you stood up to her, when the board removed her, she snapped." "What happens now?" "She is being charged with attempted arson, violating a restraining order, trespassing, and possibly criminal mischief for the previous vandalism. With the video evidence and catching her in the act, she is looking at serious prison time." The fire department checked my house and confirmed that Patricia had poured gasoline around most of the foundation. If she had lit it, the house would have gone up fast. I probably would not have made it out. I stood in my driveway as the sun came up, watching the police finish processing the scene. My neighbors came out one by one, shocked and horrified. Marcus stood with me for a while, not saying anything, just being there. "I am sorry," he finally said. "We should have acted sooner. We knew she was unstable. You could not have known she would go this far, maybe not, but we knew she was escalating and we did not do enough to stop it." The next few weeks were a blur of police statements, insurance claims, and court appearances. Patricia was denied bail due to the severity of the charges and her demonstrated willingness to escalate. Her attorney tried to argue she had a mental breakdown, but the prosecution had all my camera footage showing calculated, premeditated harassment over weeks. In early April, Patricia Hutchins pleaded guilty to attempted arson and violating a restraining order. The other charges were dropped as part of the plea deal. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. At the sentencing hearing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up, still not quite believing this was all happening over snow drainage. "I bought my house in this neighborhood because I thought it would be a good place to live," I said. "I followed every rule. I did my research. I used my property exactly as it was designed to be used, and for that, I was harassed, vandalized, sued, and nearly killed." Patricia Hutchins did not just commit a crime against me. She betrayed every principle of community and basic human decency. I hope she uses her time in prison to understand why what she did was so wrong. Patricia did not look at me. She stared straight ahead, her face blank, as the bailiffs led her away. The HOA held emergency elections in May. Marcus was elected president officially. along with a completely new board of members who seemed genuinely interested in following actual rules rather than personal vendettas. Their first act was to pass a resolution formally recognizing that property owners could use their land according to original engineering plans and county regulations, regardless of aesthetic concerns. They also hired a property management company to handle day-to-day operations, removing the ability of any one person to wield the kind of unchecked power Patricia had claimed. As spring arrived and my snow pile finally began to melt, I watched the water drain exactly as the engineers had designed it to do. It flowed into the collection point, entered the underground system, and made its way to the detention pond without any flooding or damage. In June, I received a formal written apology from the HOA board, along with reimbursement for all my legal fees, security system costs, and property damage. They also paid for my insurance deductible and gave me a year of free HOA dues. Sarah Henderson called me one afternoon to tell me that several other residents had come forward with their own stories of harassment by Patricia over the years. Nothing as severe as what I experienced, but a pattern of bullying and intimidation. Some were considering their own legal action. "You did the right thing standing up to her," Sarah said. "A lot of people would have just given in to avoid the hassle." "I am an engineer," I replied. "I cannot just ignore technical facts because someone finds them inconvenient," she laughed. "The world needs more people like you." Marcus and I became good friends through the whole ordeal. We had dinner occasionally, talking about HOA reform and how to prevent future Patricia Hutchins situations. He was genuinely committed to making Meadowbrook Heights a better place to live. One evening in July, we were sitting on my back deck with beers, looking at the corner of my yard where the great snow pile controversy had begun. The grass was green now, growing thick over the drainage area. "I still cannot believe it got that crazy," Marcus said. "When she first brought up your snow pile at the board meeting, I thought it was just another one of her minor complaints. Never imagined it would end with attempted arson. People get attached to their sense of power," I said. "Patricia built her identity around controlling the neighborhood. When that control was challenged, she did not know how to handle it. The new board is doing better. No drama, just actual community management. That is all I ever wanted, just to live in my house and pile snow where it is supposed to go." We clinked our beer bottles together, and I felt something finally settle in my chest. The battle was over. The neighborhood was healing. And next winter, when the snow started falling, I would clear my driveway and pile it exactly where the civil engineers designed it to go, without any fear of harassment or retaliation. In September, I got a letter from Western Slope Engineering. Robert Mills had included a copy of an article he had published in a civil engineering journal about the importance of maintaining original drainage designs. He used Meadowbrook Heights as a case study, though he changed the names. The article concluded with a statement about how HOAs and community organizations need to respect technical requirements even when they conflict with aesthetic preferences. "Your snow pile is now part of the engineering literature," Robert wrote in his cover letter. "Congratulations on being a cautionary tale." I framed that letter and hung it in my home office, a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing requires standing firm against people who cannot or will not understand basic facts. The neighborhood continued to thrive under new management. Property values actually increased once word got out that the tyrannical HOA president was gone. Several people told me they had been considering selling specifically because of Patricia's management style. In October, the board organized a community BBQ at the neighborhood park. It was the first social event in years that felt genuinely friendly rather than tense. Kids played on the playground while adults grilled burgers and talked about normal things like schools and sports, rather than covenant violations. I met Linda Dawson at that BBQ, a single mother who had moved in 2 streets over during the height of the conflict. She had heard about the whole situation and was relieved she had not been around for it. "I grew up in an HOA neighborhood where the president was reasonable," Linda said. "I just assumed they were all like that. This Patricia person sounds absolutely unhinged." She was. But it is better now. I hope so. I like this neighborhood. The schools are good, the location is perfect, and most of the neighbors seem nice. We talked for a while about the community, the local schools, and what it was like living in Boulder. Linda was a software developer who worked from home, and she appreciated the quiet neighborhood environment. As the sun set and the BBQ wound down, I realized I had spent an entire afternoon at an HOA event without once thinking about snow piles or drainage systems. That November, I prepared for winter with a sense of peace I had not felt in months. I serviced my snow blower, checked my tractor, and made sure everything was ready. When the first significant snowfall came in late November, I cleared my driveway and pushed the snow into its designated corner without a second thought. No one complained. No one took pictures. No one showed up with fences or spray paint. It was gloriously, beautifully boring. Marcus stopped by after the snow had accumulated to about 4 feet. He stood looking at the pile with his hands in his pockets. "You know what is funny?" he said. "Now that there is no controversy, I actually understand why the engineers put the drainage there. The natural slope makes perfect sense." "Most things make sense when you are not fighting about them," I replied. Deep wisdom from the man who went to war over snow. I did not go to war. I just refused to lose. He laughed and headed back to his own house to clear his driveway. I watched him go, then went inside to warm up with coffee and the satisfaction of a problem finally, completely resolved. In February, exactly 1 year after receiving Patricia's first violation letter, I got a different kind of notice from the HOA. It was an invitation to join the Architectural Review Committee. The board thought my engineering background and attention to detail would be valuable for reviewing modification requests and ensuring they met actual safety and design standards. I accepted. Not because I wanted power or control, but because I wanted to help prevent future situations where personal preferences overrode technical requirements. The committee met monthly, and I found satisfaction in helping neighbors navigate the approval process for reasonable modifications, while ensuring critical things like drainage and structural integrity were not compromised. In March, I ran into Patricia's former attorney at a coffee shop in Boulder. He recognized me and approached somewhat hesitantly. "Mr. Anderson, I want to apologize," he said. "I should never have filed that lawsuit. Patricia was not honest with me about the situation, and I did not do enough due diligence. It was early in my career, and I let a client push me into taking action I should have questioned." "Are you still practicing HOA law?" I asked. "God, no. I switched to estate planning. Much less drama." He gave a rueful smile. "Your case taught me some important lessons about difficult clients and knowing when to walk away." "At least something good came out of it," I said. That spring, as my snow pile melted and the drainage system worked exactly as designed, I reflected on the whole bizarre experience. I had moved to Meadowbrook Heights looking for a quiet suburban life. Instead, I got a crash course in HOA politics, the psychology of power, and how far some people will go to avoid admitting they are wrong. But I also learned about the importance of documentation, the value of good neighbors like Marcus, and the satisfaction of standing up for what is right even when it is difficult. The neighborhood was better now because someone finally said no to Patricia's bullying. Other residents felt empowered to speak up about issues. The board operated transparently and followed proper procedures. In May, on the anniversary of Patricia's sentencing, I received a victim notification letter informing me she had been denied early parole. She had apparently not shown sufficient remorse or understanding of her actions. Part of me felt bad for her, trapped in a situation of her own making. But mostly, I felt relief that she would not be released back into the community anytime soon. Summer came with warm weather and the kind of peaceful neighborhood life I had originally imagined. I worked on my yard, had friends over for barbecues, and attended HOA meetings that were admirably dull. The Architectural Review Committee approved a dozen reasonable projects without any drama. In August, Robert Mills invited me to speak at a civil engineering conference in Denver about the importance of community education regarding infrastructure design. I was nervous about public speaking, but I put together a presentation about the snow pile situation, focusing on how to communicate technical requirements to non-technical audiences. The presentation was well received. Several engineers approached me afterward with their own HOA horror stories. Apparently, conflicts between engineering requirements and aesthetic preferences were common across many communities. One engineer from a firm in Colorado Springs said they had started including HOA education as part of their project deliverables specifically to prevent future conflicts. As winter approached again, I felt ready. My second winter in the post-Patricia era would be completely normal. The snow would fall, I would clear it, and life would continue without drama, and that is exactly what happened. November brought snow. December brought more snow. January brought even more snow. My pile grew large and impressive in its designated corner, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Not one single person complained. In February, a new family moved in across the street. They had a young son who was fascinated by my snow pile. His parents asked if it was okay for him to play on it. I said yes, and spent a Saturday afternoon helping him build tunnels and slides into the packed snow. His father helped, and we talked about the neighborhood and engineering and the importance of good drainage design. "I heard there was some drama about this spot last year," he said casually. "You could say that." "Well, I think it is great. My kid is having a blast, and you are managing your property responsibly. That is all that matters." That simple statement felt like a final validation. A new neighbor, with no history of the conflict, saw the situation for exactly what it was: responsible property management. As February turned to March and another winter season wound down, I stood in my driveway one evening watching the sun set behind the mountains. My snow pile was beginning its annual melt, water flowing exactly where it was supposed to flow. The drainage system worked perfectly, just as it had for 20 years, just as it would for 20 more. Marcus walked over from his house, following his own routine of evening walks around the neighborhood. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking about how crazy last year was. Different world now. Good different, definitely." We stood there together in comfortable silence, two neighbors who had been through something strange and come out better for it. The sky turned orange and pink, the temperature dropped, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary neighborhood, which was exactly what it should have been all along. The snow pile saga had ended not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet resolution. Patricia was in prison, serving time for crimes that should never have happened. The neighborhood had reformed its governance. I continued to use my property exactly as designed. And life went on, peaceful and normal and good. Sometimes the biggest battles are over the smallest things. A pile of snow in a corner of a yard should never have become a year-long conflict ending in attempted arson. But it did, because one person could not accept that rules applied to her, that technical requirements mattered, and that she did not have absolute control over everyone around her. I learned that standing up to bullies is worth it, even when it is hard. I learned that documentation and facts matter. I learned that good neighbors and good attorneys are invaluable. And I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to back down when you know you are right. As I went inside that evening, I glanced back one more time at the snow pile corner. In a few weeks, it would be just grass and dirt again. But next winter, the snow would return, and the cycle would continue exactly as the civil engineers designed it to function 22 years ago. And this time, no one would try to stop it.